ultimately is just trying to meet a need, whether that be emotional eating, whether that be whatever that looked like for you, right? Engaging in harmful relationships, going out and partying when actually you want to stay home, whatever that toxic pattern, toxic cycle is for you. Lori's story is no different to that.
The journey of breaking your own toxic patterns is one of probably the hardest things that you will do, but it is hands down the greatest gift you will ever give to yourself. Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
And this is Emilia.
Welcome to another episode of Evolve Ventures, where we are helping growth-minded humans evolve by breaking one limiting belief at a time. We hope you enjoyed the last episode, number 247, Motivation Monday. 3 qualities that will make you desirable. For today, 248, how to break toxic patterns in your life. The challenging truth that I have seen time and time again, and I know you will agree with this because you've seen it too, is that human beings are run by patterns.
Oh, yeah.
The unfortunate truth is that we repeat the same exact cycles and we end up in the same experiences, in the same situations, dealing with the same emotions and having the same outcomes over and over and over again. And because of this fact, we feel like our lives are completely stuck and that we are not going to be able to change. There's this feeling like change isn't possible because we've convinced ourselves that we've done everything we can to try to change. But the problem is we haven't gotten to the root of the issue, which is the pattern that we are consistently running over and over again. So what we're going to be diving into in this episode is, how do you actually start breaking these patterns? What does it require? What is involved in actually identifying these patterns? And then what does it take to break them? So that's what we're going to be diving into today.
Yeah. And I'm going to change out the name for confidentiality purposes, but I want to use this story to really highlight the example of how palatable breaking a toxic pattern in your life can really, really be. So Lori is someone who is in her 20s. And when she grew up in a really, honestly, in hindsight, and she's now learning this, quite a toxic upbringing. A lot of fighting, lots of emotional neglect, emotional abuse, a lot of physical abuse. And why I mention that is because there are a lot of people like Lori who grew up in a household that wasn't stable in the terms of she felt holistically safe. And so as a coping mechanism to her not feeling safe, even with the family and the people that she believed to have been the safest people in her life, she developed a lot of negative patterns in her life over the span of her teenage years, right? Really, really engaging in some harmful behaviors, and that piling into really unhealthy relationships, right? All of that compounded into a really nasty habit of smoking cigarettes and really using cigarettes as an opportunity for her to self-soothe and cope. Now, this isn't to hate or shame or blame or guilt anyone in the way in which they needed to survive and to feel like they could get through the day at all. But I want to share Lori's example for us to be able to understand exactly what Bianca and I said. The toxic patterns that are keeping us feeling like we're spinning, never really gaining traction in our story of life, or really not getting us to where we want to go. Instead, it feels like it slips further and further away. That pattern will continuously show up, whether it be in cigarettes, right? Coping in a mechanism that, ultimately is just trying to meet a need, whether that be emotional eating, whether that be whatever that looked like for you. right? Engaging in harmful relationships, going out and partying when actually you want to stay home, whatever that toxic pattern, toxic cycle is for you. Lori's story is no different to that. And what we ultimately were able to get through with her level of vulnerability and some of the things that I'm going to bring up in her story is when you can have an awareness to these patterns, you can have the opportunity to break them. And that's key number one here. When you're constantly being run day in, day out, just like Lori was, about her unconscious patterns, and thus the behaviors, the emotions, the thoughts that ultimately built her life to where it is today, that doesn't allow us the opportunity to accept what we can't change. It doesn't give us the opportunity to grieve what we've lost. It doesn't give us the opportunity to accept what is actually within our control, which is breaking those patterns, which is breaking those toxic environments that we put ourselves in, the relationships that don't serve us. And it works us through the process of compassion for the fact that these patterns have developed out of habit. They've developed from a place of trying to serve ourselves in the best way possible. And so now Lori, where she is today, she's finally broken and quit smoking cigarettes for life. So she's now working towards, not only has she broken the pattern that was keeping her really stuck, right? And she's worked to overcome some of the root components, what was causing that in the first place. But she's now started to rechannel her behavior in a way that is now serving her to break all of the other toxic patterns that she's seen come up in her life. Now, if Lori can do it, I know all of our listeners can too. But it starts with asking yourself the question on why we have this toxic pattern in the first place. In Lori's story, what we did is we uncovered the whys, and ultimately it came down from a limiting belief that was planted within her at a very, very young age, which was she was not worthy and not lovable, not worthy of being loved for who she was. Now, she was kind of the black sheep of the family. She stuck out. She felt her emotions a lot deeper than some of her siblings. And so as a result, she never really was able to be heard. Whenever she would speak up, she'd be suppressed and shut down. So she developed this unconscious need to really cope through putting things like a cigarette in her mouth, or whether it be chewing her fingernails or whatever it is. And that soothed her central nervous system, right? And I could go into all the other things, that the patterns that developed over time. But here's the thing. Once we got down to that root, that helps her to realize, again, gain that awareness of, oh, well, because I didn't feel lovable and because I didn't feel worthy of life, and that was the narrative that I grew up with. Oh, some of the patterns to be able to cope with that really hard feeling of quote unquote truth, that ended up spiraling for me out of control. And that's why I did this. Oh, that's why I did that. That's why I engaged in a relationship that didn't serve me. That's why I tolerated the behaviors from people that were just so mean and rude and unacceptable, and the abuse from that relationship. Oh, that's why.
Hi, my name is Kayleigh Putnam, and I'm an intern at Evolve Ventures Tech, and I work with data analytics. I just wanted to come on here and talk about my experience with the Evolve team. Every single day, I learn new skills, not only my position, but also how to become the best and most aligned version of myself. I've learned through their support that I can achieve any goal I set my mind to, and anything that I want to happen will happen if I work hard enough. I've never met a group of more supportive and genuine people than at Evolve. Every single day, members check in on other members, asking if they're okay, what they can do to help, and it's such a caring environment. And I'm so grateful I got the opportunity to work with this team, because I feel like they've truly given me what I need to be successful in my future careers, and I'm so grateful for that.
So she learned that a lot of the toxic patterns and behaviors that were happening all stemmed back to that core belief that she was unlovable and that she was unworthy. Now, all of us, as we talked about on this podcast, all of us have a core belief that's limiting. And that core belief, if left unchecked, and if we are not aware of what that is for you as a listener, we end up just becoming a byproduct of all of these toxic patterns that end up becoming our life, right? We end up in a job we hate. We end up in a relationship that's unfulfilling. Our friends, they're always surface level conversations. We never feel like we can be ourselves. We end up numbing, coping, doing whatever we can to escape the reality that has become our life. And how do we stop that? How do we break that pattern? It starts by going to the root, like Bianca said. Accepting what that root is and not trying to change it, but rather look at what the narrative is and start to change that. That's reinforcing those behaviors. That's reinforcing those thoughts. That's reinforcing the emotions that you feel when you think those thoughts. And when you can have that awareness, you can start to change those thoughts. You can start to change the narrative. You can start to construct your emotions differently. And as a byproduct of all of that, your behaviors therein can be broken. They can be replaced. They can be swapped with something more soothing. And for Lori, it was reading. For you, what could that be? Now, if you need help trying to figure out what your toxic patterns are, maybe you're at the first stage where you didn't even realize that was something that was toxic because you grew up and this is normal. Someone like what Lori did, to be a party that can actually observe where those are toxic patterns, that can make a huge difference for you, right? If you need that help, Bianca and I are always going to be here for you. That's something that I want to make sure our listeners know. And B, I know that you've experienced this more often than not when it comes to your clients too. Once you can uncover what that core limiting belief is and that core wound and work towards what the narratives, what the dialogue, and then kind of get underneath that, see what the awareness needs to happen when it comes to our patterns, see what we need to accept where we can't control other people, but then accepting what we can control and what we do have responsibility for and what we can have compassion for. That makes a world of difference with someone who's going down that journey.
The journey of breaking your own toxic patterns is one of probably the hardest things that you will do, but it is hands down the greatest gift you will ever give to yourself. And the transformations that I've been able to see in Em, I'm sure you've experienced the same exact thing. The transformations that I've been able to see with clients has been, it's shattered my view of the world, honestly. Like, I'll give a perfect example. I've talked about this client very often. I have a client at work. She is the most extreme case I have ever seen of someone who's experienced unspeakable trauma. Like, this girl has had nonstop for her entire life, for 30 something years, she endured trauma, and every type of trauma imaginable. Like, if you think it, she's been through it. And when I met her, she had just attempted suicide and had just been in a 1-month hospital stay in the ER because, number one, she had a really traumatic suicide attempt, and number two, she was severely anorexic. And she went from that to just radically transforming her life. She's a peak performer at her job, one of the top performers at her job. She's in a loving relationship where she's leading the relationship. She has friendships that she never thought she was going to have. She's building a vision for her future. She's doing all of these amazing things because she was willing to finally look at the patterns that were running her life, the situations that happened to her, and the behaviors that she continuously ran that perpetuated her suffering and her traumas. And she did that work and she transformed. And every time I talk to her, it just blows my mind how adaptable human beings are. So if someone like that can change, I know without a shadow of a doubt it is possible for you too. And we can help you to do that. Emilia and I are both still accepting clients. Evolve Ventures mental health practice is open. So the organization is accepting new clients. So if you are looking for a therapist, looking for a coach, looking for somewhere where you're finally going to actually get results and finally have someone who understands you, reach out and we'll get you started.
It's time to take advantage of the resources that are right at your disposal, to activate the courage that you have within you, to leverage the humility that you're trying to cultivate so that you can see a brighter future, and the vulnerability components that make all of that happen. So if that sounds like you, please reach out. All of our contact information is in the show notes. Bianca, final episode suggestion and takeaway for our listeners.
I think I'm content with the takeaway that I had said with the last statement, so I'll leave it at that. Okay. Episode suggestion is 130, 3 tips to understand and handle your emotions.
Beautiful. And mine for our listeners today is 229. It's another motivation Monday, how to start self-forgiveness. And I think that will be a nice little compliment to the absolute necessity around this breaking the toxic patterns process. So we hope you enjoyed today's episode. We hope to hear from you soon. Have an amazing Thursday.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.